Everybody online, our staff, and Alan from the media with a nice little French cap on there. Okay, today's workshop is the annual plan budget workshop, and Simon's going to lead that off for us.
Kia ora, everybody. This is the first of our public workshops on the annual plan for 26-27. So we do have some changes from what was part of the LTP, and we will talk you through those today. So there's we have 2 hours to go through the presentation. So we'll do a bit of an intro around what the for those new councillors, an introduction to the to what an annual plan actually is. We'll give you a bit of an update on our timeline from here. There are some changes in the rates movement from the long-term plan, as we talked about earlier, but we'll go into what the drivers are for those, and what we have done so far internally to address those financial challenges. There's been a lot of work already, but we've got a lot more work to do collectively, and we need your help and input into this. So as I say, this is our first public workshop. The other things we will talk about today about the levers we can potentially use, but these are probably more for a governance input. And there will be things that maybe we haven't thought of that we need your input into as well. We'll be talking about the consultation topic, which is our stormwater integration project, which isn't currently factored into these figures, but we'll give you an idea of what that looks like as well. I just want to say at the beginning, as I said to you in the briefing that we gave as part of the induction, we do have a significant financial challenge in front of us. We have managed to reduce that figure a little bit from what we talked about last week, but I guess this does highlight the ongoing challenge that BDC faces in terms of getting back to a place, or getting to a place where we are sure about the data we have, particularly in our asset management space. We've got a lot more robust information about our asset information, which has enabled us to look at our depreciation more critically, look at our capital works program more critically. Having a new team on board, having Leslie and Sahana, has been a blessing, because they've been able to look at things afresh and come up with some really good ideas, but also highlight some errors that were in the model, or maybe not in the model, but the way we were using the model. Hard coding of figures into where formulae should be, and the way the model is currently set up allows that to happen. So we need to address that. So this is really highlighting to you, we've gone back to basics. We've gone back to the very start to see where we should be. And this is what we're presenting to you today. This is the start of the conversation. We've got 2 hours. We'll take you through. Feel free to ask questions at any point. I will chip in where required, but really this will be Leslie and John and Sahana to talk us through. We also have Jess here, who might talk a little bit later on about the submission topic, some detail around that. And we have Anthony Blom online as well, who can talk to some of the infrastructure challenges. Over to the team.
First of all, thanks for your time this afternoon. I know it's a pretty packed day for everyone, so we'll get through this as best we can. So the first part we wanted to discuss was, and this is more so for elected members that have just came on board back in October. We want to talk about what an annual plan is versus what it is not, because there's a common misconception around the country that the annual plans can be used to make significant changes. Ultimately, based on significance, that would maybe put a long-term plan amendment in place if you have to do that. So we're certainly not looking at doing that. Simon has alluded to the fact that what we're presenting today is we've very much went back to our basics to understand exactly how we've got to where we're at. So an annual plan is a statutory 1-year plan and budget that we must prepare in the 2 years between the long-term plans. Now, that's usually the case. However, of course, we've done a long-term plan last year. It's a 9-year plan rather than 10 years. So it's only one annual plan you'll get this triennium, or this 3-year period. It'll be this annual plan, and then of course next year we'll be back into the long-term plan 2027, 2037. Now I do have to highlight today quite quickly that there's for next year's long-term plan, there's already a massive programme of work that's ahead of us, and the expectation is once the annual plan is adopted, we're pretty quickly moving into a environmental scan and a lookout for next year. So that's a wee forward for you to know that there's some critical decisions you'll have to take at that point. But let's look at this first, and then before we can get to that. Obviously, if there are significant changes, the council must consult with the community. There is not an expectation on council to consult. I guess it's best practice. We do think it's important that our community gives us input. So if we can do it, usually in the past we've taken the choice to do so. There was an annual plan, I think, back in 2022. I may be wrong with the year, but that we didn't consult with the public, and I think the view certainly from there is that will be what we'll try and do if at all possible. Now, what we're doing, as Jess will allude to later on, there is a consultation topic around the stormwater, and that's around the Kinoa funding and the 3.4 million around that figure input that Buller District Council will have to have is 60% funded, 40% has to come from local share. Obviously, the annual plan highlights material changes to projects, the timing of the funding. Now, what you'll see this afternoon when we start talking about our net debt figures is we've made quite a positive stride in that. But that's because we're looking again how we're funding things, when we're doing it, if we're timing it correctly, are we drawing down money when it's the right point to do so. So that's something that the team will discuss later on with you. However, we have made some positive impacts to that. And of course, the main focus of an annual plan is around variation. Now, one thing, the annual plans are not audited. They don't come with an audit from EY. However, obviously, it's the numbers that go through your annual plan roll into your long-term plan. So, of course, ultimately, it's audited anyway.
So, yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So, thanks, John. Look, you indicated that it's really just taking the extract from the long-term plan and looking at variations, etc. But given that we're working in a completely different environment even now to when the truncated LTP was introduced, it's not inconceivable to me that at this table, elected members might find significant changes from the LTP that they want to see introduced. There's nothing to prevent that, is there?
There's certainly nothing to prevent it. Obviously, depending on things that you'd like to talk about, it depends if it impacts the significance of engagement policy, and if it does, that's when we have to think about a long-term plan amendment, which of course is a bigger piece of work. And I think based on the timing we're looking at, I mean, you'll see when the timeline comes out later on, the draft is due to be with you with the elected members at the end of March. So yes, is a short answer. You can. But just in terms of the timing, it may not be it might just not be feasible to deliver that. We can try, but I would suggest it's probably not. We're probably not in the right timing wise to be able to do that just now. Anything to add to that?
No.
Yeah. I know what just said there about we're not going to be able to implement it. But from a governance perspective, we might be able to prioritise some of the things in our discussions in that some of the priority for things are going to change from the LTP. So what I take from your comment is that, yeah, we can change it. There'll be significant impact in resourcing and all that sort of thing. But if we want to start the ball rolling on something that is a priority to us, we can certainly do it as part of this process. Even if it's just noting that we won't get it resolved in this annual plan, we can make it a priority for us as governor in governance role, to put it on the agenda and start dealing with it.
Yeah, and absolutely, that's pretty much the main purpose of this afternoon, as Simon has alluded to, is to talk through where we're at. But ultimately, in order to move forward, we have to have input from you guys. We have to understand what's important for you, what your priorities are, what levers do you think we have to impact the numbers that we're looking at for the community. So yes, the short answer is yes. I think I agree with you, Councillor Hingston. But ultimately, is it an annual plan question, or is it something we can deliver in the next 2 months, or is it something that we should roll into a long-term plan? I think as elected members, that input would be brilliant. and it's something that we as staff can look at and go, it's maybe a long-term plan question, or if it's something we can deliver as part of the annual plan, then we'll absolutely aim to do so.
Well, the fact that, you know, just following on for the last two speakers, it stands to reason with a predominantly new, different council, not new, but different, there will be changes. And I think, you know, we have to listen to what our community said. And I think we have to be quite open. And if there's something that needs changing, well, we have to go along that line.
No, I completely agree. Like I said, that the opportunity is absolutely there. It just depends on what the variations are. That's the critical part as to what the changes are really. That's the thing that really matters.
Might be exposing my naivety by asking this question, but the vexed issue of the rates review, going back about 11 years, is there an intersection between that and this process with the annual plan?
Leslie may be able to answer this one a wee bit better than me, I think.
We have not had a look at the rates. We've not done any review on it. We don't have time for this one for a start, because it takes some time and we would need to be consulting a bit more deeply. So we haven't done it, and probably the best time to do the review, which I think I've said before, is when we actually, the three waters or the waters activities move over to the entity, because then we know what's left and what we've got, and that's probably the best time to do that review.
Just on that note then, because I mean, I don't think we can force any big changes, but we can be noting from this process what needs to then be pushed into the long-term plan, so that we're not forgetting those priorities, because I think the long-term plan is going to be a big document for us going forward. So we just need to make sure we capture those discussions and don't lose them when we're going into the long-term plan process.
So just to note, I mean, your long-term plan will be the first plan that you'll have had without water. So that's when, as you say, everything, the landscape will have completely changed. So it will be a really interesting discussion around what we have left. Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think, yeah, that's a really valid point, and that's what I was saying earlier on around the fact that it's already looking huge. Certainly from my perspective. So I think just to add to Councillor Curno's point, I think that one thing we will need to consider as we move into a long-term plan. I know that we're slightly off topic with this one, but I think in terms of how we rate for water, I think that's a discussion that we should be having as part of that process, in terms of, you know, do we look at district-wide, do we look at what's the best option for us? I think that's something we seriously need to think about, and I've already got on the radar to start those discussions as the time moves on. So the next part, what is the annual plan not? So I think this probably answers the questions we've just spoken about. So it doesn't replace the strategic multi-year direction of the council. What it does have the ability to do is exactly what you've mentioned, in terms of, can we start to figure out key priorities that we need to start thinking about for next year. It's not a vehicle for large unplanned shifts without appropriate consultation or an amended LTP. I think that's exactly what I said earlier on. And it's not a full rewrite of the strategic direction. And like I say, it's not a replacement for the multi-year strategy. The one thing that was quite challenging in our last long-term plan processes, one thing that came out loud and clear across the country is most councils have a vision for their community, or a vision for where they see their community progressing. Council at that point took the decision not to have a vision or a strategic objective for that time. So I would suggest that as a council, it's maybe a good idea as we move forward to start thinking about what your vision is as elected members for our district. So just a quick one on the timeline. Now, clearly, the 25th of February today is our first time that we've got together. We've obviously had the briefing a few months ago after you got inducted to understand what an annual plan is, what's going to be expected of you, etc. The next one, is going to be on the 11th of March. That's potentially a budget by activity review. So what that means is, based on the information that you give us today, or the ideas that you've came up with, we will take away the GMs plus their teams will look at see if we can input any of the changes or the amendments, and we'll come back with some further information. We'll confirm the consultation dates. We've already drafted those in, but we'll just make sure that they're booked for the right dates. Then we're proposing to put a draft annual planning consultation document in front of council at the end of March. I think what this timeline shows, is to Simon's point earlier on, there is a really short time. And the reason why we have to bring the consultation and the draft back at the end of March is because of the funding from Canoa, because there's only a certain amount of time that we've got to respond to that funding. And in fact, the matter is, we thought we didn't want community, consultation fatigue for the community, and we also wanted to make sure that we gave them the opportunity to consult on it. The 30th of March to the 30th of April will be the proposed consultation dates. Something I will discuss with you in a little while is what you would like to see from the consultation. One thing that came out loud and clear last year was that we probably should look at it a different way. So let's have a conversation and see if you have any ideas that we can put forward to the team. Mid-May we'll do our hearings and deliberations. So we propose on those dates to put some recommendations forward. First of all, for the consultation topic, so that we can go back to Canoa and tell them yes or no is the key one, and also to give the finance team chance to write and finish the documentation. And obviously in the June council meeting we'll do the adoption of the final annual plan. Any questions on the timeline? Councillor Rutherford.
Yeah, look at, I'm not sure the point I'm trying to make by this question, but why do we find these timeframes so compressed, acknowledged by the staff that we're in a very short time frame? We've known about this for, forever. We know this happens. Why is it the end of February before we're even having this first significant workshop? We've been around for a few months already. Why are we always pushed into this position that, well, actually, guys, we're running out of time. We're going to have to make this a very compressed rah. It shouldn't happen.
Yeah, I think there's probably two ways to answer that question, Councillor Rutherford. I think, look, that's certainly not what we're going to do for the long-term plan. That's for sure. I think that's one part of it. The second part of it is that it is a triennium cycle. I think with the time the elected members get put in place, then you get inducted, then it's Christmas, then it's January. We pretty much don't have any council meetings in January. You're in February anyway. So that, I guess that would be my answer in terms of, is there something like that?
Yeah, I think specifically for this one as well, we had a bit of a depleted staffing in finance, which held everything up. Plus, we'll explain it later. We've gone right back to base on this one, right back to base to actually bring these budgets up. We've not just looked at them and said, yeah, that looks all right, or we'll tweak them. We've gone back to base. So, and we've had lots of conversations and backwards and forwards with staff and the SLT to ensure that we know what's in the figures, and that we're giving you the cost. It's the cost of what we are doing. So there's been a lot of work this time to actually do that. And yeah, ideally, we would have this information to you earlier. And as John has said, for the LTP, it will be. It is what it is this time, I'm afraid. We've also, as John said, got to bring this forward because of the Canoa funding. So yeah, totally understand what you're saying.
I mean, if I just add one point to that, Councillor, through some of the research I've been doing around the motto that a lot of councils are not consulting until the end of April, start of May. We're doing it at the beginning of April, so that's a whole 4 or 5 weeks from when others are doing it. So there is, I think, the consultation item is a big part of it. But I think we also need to add in, just to further Leslie's point, our finance team or our organisation is also going through all our annual reports right now, and I can promise you that we've spent a lot of time on that, as hopefully you'll see later on this afternoon. So yeah, there's probably mitigating circumstances for this one that I certainly, my promise to you is it's not going to be the same next year.
I just think too, as governance, I just want to note that we need to have utmost confidence in what's financially being supported going forward. And we've got some big projects coming up this year. So I hear what you're saying, and I kind of feel like that we need to be in that position where we know our financial reporting is very accurate, because it's going to have to be for some of the decisions we make going forward. So I have a level of confidence in that this might be a compressed process, this annual plan, but that hopefully it will give us that level of confidence going forward that we're making the right decisions, because we have got some big stuff coming up that we need to know that what's in front of us is accurate. So
Yeah, Paul.
We just need to cut to the chase. The words to an extent are meaningless to me. I want to see some figures. We've got a figure from Simon what the rate increase he would like, and I want to see that in front of me where that's to be spread, so that I can print it, because it's certainly a figure that needs to be printed. And I'd like to be able to consider that with my fellow councillors and look at it and say, well, we don't want to spend here, we don't want to spend here. So the words to the extent are just delaying us from getting to that point, because those figures have already been decided. That we have a figure that's predicted. So I want to see the figures in front of me spread over the budget, so I can analyse it and see where I would like to see changes made. Okay.
Point noted, we'll move on. Right, so this is a summary of the rates movement. So what you'll see, you've got your general rates. This will be, I think Caitlin's already put this on your iPads. If she's not, it will be on in the next 5-10 minutes. So what you'll see is a few different columns here. You've got your 25-26 LTP figure, which is, so that's what was published in our LTP document. This was also what was published in the LTP document for 26-27, and then this is the number that we are proposing in front of you today. So as you'll see, the numbers just below that at the bottom is the year-on-year increase from the previous time. So the headline number obviously is the 15.6% total rates movement. Now that's not 15.6% off 0%, it's at a further 6.5 based on what we published in the long-term plan. Now there is multiple reasons for that. I'm going to pass you over to the finance ladies in a minute just to talk you through what they are. But that is what our headline number is, or our full rates movement. You'll see the difference in general rates there at 15.6, and you'll see our targeted rate movement of 11.9, and that adds to a total rates movement of 15.6%.
Just an admin matter. I can't see those numbers from here. We don't have this document currently, do we? That's a real pity, because there'll be lots of stuff. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Linda.
Going back to the long-term plan that we adopted last year, if my memory serves right, that we basically gave ourselves like a self-imposed rate cap, over the life of the plan. So what were the numbers we were looking at of increases over the life of the long-term plan in comparison? Because I thought it was around 7%. Was it 1 year it was higher? Was it 9%? Yeah, and then the rest of the years were average out as like 7%. So I find it alarming that we are now looking at 15% when we just spent a long time and effort, going through numbers and that we came up with a long-term plan that we've adopted, and then all of a sudden we haven't even done the first year saying, oh, actually we've somehow got it wrong. So did we agree, is there a resolution that was the rating cap, or is that me making something up?
It's a benchmark.
Yeah.
It's not the cost of doing the business as it is, with the level of services as it is the cost we've come up with now. Now, we don't have anybody that was here did not have a crystal ball at that point. there are many factors that go into the increases, and everybody always says, oh, surely CPI. Costs go up more than CPI. And we don't know there are certain things we do not know at the time we're preparing a plan. And at the moment, energy costs, we know that they've increased a great deal, more than we could ever have known at that point in time. So there are things that will always produce a higher rate increase. And the benchmark of 7%, I think, probably knowing the financial situation, you know, that we weren't comfortable with figures and numbers and plans, was probably very, very optimistic at that time. It would have been lovely, yes, it would have been great, but I think it was very optimistic. And we will talk through what these variances are and where we've come with these increases as we go along in the plan.
So given that we did a whole consultation on the long-term plan and we've gone out to the public and, you know, obviously then adopted, so does that kind of go out the window then? That we are now moving vastly out of, you know, away from that plan that we consulted on and, you know, members of the public submitted on and that, and then now we're saying in year one, actually, we got it wrong.
We're not actually going away from the plan, it's just the costs of the services within that plan.
But I guess for us, like when we make decisions about adopting a long-term plan, we look at the numbers and then we agree, you know, like for instance, to get that rise down, we would then have to cut some services, you know, like there are decisions, we wouldn't have approved some of the projects. Yeah. So that's what that's what I can't get my head around, that we did all this consultation based on these numbers and now we're being told actually that was optimistic. The numbers were wrong, basically. That's quite concerning to me.
I'm not saying that they were all wrong. I'm saying there are also cost increases that we couldn't possibly have known about. It is a plan, it's an estimate, and especially the longer you go out in a plan, the more estimated it is and the further your deviation will be from your standard and your average.
Can I just make a comment about those costs? Like, I would think the cost of power is a widely known New Zealand, you know, like we are all consumers of power and it's been out in the media and that we know, you know, like we've been given forewarning that the cost of energy prices, especially on the West Coast where we are, like are skyrocketing. So I don't understand how that assumption has been widely underestimated. Yeah, that also concerns me.
Rosalie and then right. Yep. Sorry, John.
I've got two issues. I must be particularly sick today, but we've got general rates with the increase of 15%. Then we've got targeted rates at 11%, the wastewater, and then total rates are 15%. So where does the targeted rate? Is that 15.6 plus 11.9? Or so is our general rate 15% less the targeted rate, which would bring it down to 4%? Right.
No, sorry. The general rates is actually 15% just on that line. It's just a coincidence that they both are 15 because it's got one decimal, so it's just a rounding. The general rates has gone up 15%. The targeted rates has gone up 11%. And then because of the separation rates, which is not included in the 25-26 year, which is effectively at 100% increase, the three together cumulatively result in a 15.6% increase.
So now I ask, what is the targeted rate? So you're saying the general rate is still 15.6% increase?
Yes.
And so is the targeted rate at 11%?
Yes. And we mustn't forget the separation rates 100%.
Yeah.
So mathematically it all works out to cumulative between the 23,195 to the 26,820 is a 15.6% increase. Yeah.
So, but the separation rate doesn't go to all ratepayers though, does it? It's a targeted rate, the separation rate.
Yeah, I'm not too sure at this
Yeah,
stage.
there's a targeted rate, but we're showing it separately because it wasn't included in the plan.
I think, Leslie, Jess, did you have something to add?
Yes, it was a targeted rate.
So it's not a general rate for everybody. So the other question was, we had our figures for last year. And then we've had this increase. Can we have the comparison side by side to see, not a summary, a breakdown of where these increases, because as Linda said, anybody doing a budget, we all knew their power was going up. Insurance has come down, and there may be other things that we hadn't foreseen that really we could do without. So a side by side breakdown of figures on last year to this year.
Yeah, we do have if we just go to the next page. And you'll all have them in your, you'll now have that by email. I've just sent it out a couple of minutes ago. Okay. So you can look at that a bit better.
Okay, now just before we go to Ray, I've just got one question. Leslie, the electricity, can we tease that out a little more? My understanding, electricity's gone up enormously over the last 12 months. What is it, 30% or
37%.
37%? And how does that compare to what might have been forecast, 12 months, 2 years ago? Was that sort of crazy, unexpected?
There's another driver behind that as well, and that was some work that was done at the Reef, was it the Reefton Pool? Reefton Pool, which has created a bigger energy draw.
And it's called to actually.
But what's the 37% was that anticipated when the last? No, so just what sort of a normal sort of cost of living, whatever increase was assumed. Okay, Linda,
I can probably add to that. I know.
Thanks.
Yeah, just a mechanical question. I haven't got a calculator with me. What would the percentage increase have been were we to hold the line at the 26, 27 LTB? In other words, the difference between 23.1 and 25.2.
9%.
How much?
9%
Thank you.
in total. Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, thanks, Ray. Paul, and then Linda.
Again, we're looking at this the wrong way around. This is the end point. Obviously, the figures that generate those figures, and that gives us the decision to make changes. We talk about this being locked in the last year's consultation. Well, the consultation, in my view, that were put out were dishonest. They were dishonest because the public were told you can have option A, you can have option B. That's not a consultation that has any integrity whatever. And that's locked ratepayers into targeted rates for the guise of infrastructure, where the label for infrastructure to be changed to staff wages, because the majority of the fund I took apart shows that the money goes to pay staff wages. The minority of it goes to improve infrastructure. So those targeted rates that came from a consultation with the public were told you can die by hanging or garrotting when there's not much difference, they didn't get a choice. And we need to revisit that. And maybe some of those can be chucked out of the budget altogether because there are more economic ways to resolve them. But we won't get to that solution to look at them while we look at these end figures of the amounts of money you want to increase rates by. We need to look at what figures you've got on there before we look at the end point. We've got to see the beginning figures, what generates them.
So the next slide has the drivers behind the increases, so the main increases, but it's usual to practice, I've found around council, to actually give you the end figure first of all, because you go through and you're looking at things, but you don't know what you're wanting to cut, or you're not knowing what that final outcome is. And I've found in the past that councillors want to know what that end figure is, and then they can start thinking about the rest. You don't know if you don't know at the beginning what your rates figure increases. You might go along, oh yeah, that's all right, that's all right, that's all right, and then get there and they go, oh, now we've got to start again.
Okay, thanks, Leslie. Okay, Linda.
Just going back to your comment about the Reef and Pool, projects, you know, that has been in, there's been a separate budget for that. For instance, changing, you know, there was a lot of work, like you said, that had to change the electricity connection there. So I'm a little bit baffled by the statement that drove up electricity prices when that project's been on the books for, you know, it's been delayed by 2 years. So can you explain a bit more like how that was not a forecasted thing? Because the money, my understanding is it's like a bit of a closed account line. That money's been sitting there budgeted for the Reefton swimming pool. So I don't know how that would then affect a rate rise.
I'm going to ask Anthony to explain that.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me? Very good.
Be quiet, Anthony. You might need to
thanks.
speak up.
Oh, sorry. The Reefton pool, so the capital project to do the upgrades is certainly in a closed account. What wasn't fully understood when that was kicked off was what the consequential operating cost would be for that. And in particular, what has surprised the team is that the power company has applied a significant charge to get power to the new transformer, even though we have paid for it ourselves and we've investigated that, and they are entitled to charge effectively a capacity charge for that. So the cost to operate the new the new equipment at the Reefton pool has not been properly budgeted for in the past, because it wasn't until this year that they came along and said, oh, by the way, we're going to increase your charges on that. And that's one of a number of surprises we've had with the power companies. One of the examples that we've managed to pull back was I think it costs $500 odd a month for power use for the clock tower. The invoice 2 months ago included a connection charge of $5,000 a month to get power to the clock tower. We pulled that one back. They've decided that was wrong, but those sorts of things are popping up across the board in terms of significant connection charges. Reefton Pool is another one, and we're not able to pull that back at all.
Thank you. I acknowledge this is a workshop, but I want to build on what Paul was saying before. I mean, personally, I'm an advocate for zero rates increases. So any of these figures that I see, firstly, I'm not agreeing to them. I acknowledge that this is a workshop where we're discussing things. What I want to see is decisions based on choices. As Paul was saying, there's a decision that we went out previously with the last council, and I'm not going to agree to any rates rises either determined by the previous council or delivered by a fait accompli and rushing through an annual plan or something through. So I just want to see real choices. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm not going to agree to them, but what I'm saying is there's a very low appetite for increased rate rises. So where we want to go forward is decisions put to us that are real decisions, that are real choices. Like if you want to stop a 5% rates rise, then, you know, you're going to have to cut services or whatever it is, or we're going to have to reduce something somewhere else. I mean, those are the sorts of things that I accept will come through. And I acknowledge that, you know, this is a workshop, as I said. But in this workshop, we have to be prepared to entertain ideas to get that figure down. And those are the choices that I see coming. Those are the things I'd like to discuss. You know, all the other things concerning services, concerning with, you know, flood protection, all those other things, yeah, they're important. But until we really dig deep into the rates review and everything else, I look at these figures and I go, yeah, that's what you're projecting. And I acknowledge that's what you're projecting if we continue on the same trajectory. But I think we should have some real on-ramps and off-ramps considered now to get that figure down to a more reasonable figure. What if those are, I couldn't tell you. Maybe in our review of things, we can start putting things where we can make more money, more income for the district council and reduce expenditure in a real way, not just carry on saying, well, you know, power's gone up. You know, everything else has gone up, so you'll put the rates up. That's like a double whammy for the ratepayers. That's pretty much what I wanted to say. Is that I was hoping to see choices and consider with an open mind about how we can address these projections.
Thanks, Dave. John, just in terms of the process that you guys, you know, went through to come up with, you know, what you anticipate, you know, the increase might be or might need to be. Can you just explain, you know, very briefly that process, picking up on what Dave Hingston said, and why you wouldn't have done that in what you're presenting here today? And if you haven't, what the options might be to readdress that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And so what we've done is, I think it's safe to say, based on what Simon and Leslie mentioned earlier on, we have spent many hours together in a room going through exactly what's been put into the budget today. And we'll talk later on about exactly what we've done in terms of getting to the number, because we started on a higher figure than we're at now. There's no getting away from that. And Simon and collectively says that this we need to work, make sure we've done a lot of work, and we have. I don't even know I don't even want to count the amount of hours we've spent doing it, but we have done it. The process starts where all the group managers, you know, you get your budget from the previous year. You figure what projects need to go in. You work out you add your CPI, your adjusted costs. Then you come back together. We all meet collectively. We look at the cost of delivering the services versus what we're put into our plan, and then we come out with a budget. And then that's where we then say to each other, right, okay, do we honestly think, you know, are we going to deliver this? Are we not going to deliver this? Is this something we can defer? Is it something that has to go in next year? Can we put it into the year after? Because we've done that with quite a few projects, to be honest. So all I would say is, in terms of the process that we've took, I can hand on heart say that we've spent multiple hours, days, trying to get to the bottom line of what we're delivering.
Can I just say that in looking at last year's budgets or whatever budgets and adding CPI, in this instance, we went back to basics, looking at contracts. What does the contract say? Is there a CPI adjustment? Is there something more than a CPI adjustment on it? So we've done more work than just looking at the budget and saying add CPI. We've actually gone back to base on it. What is in that contract? What is the cost of doing that? How long are we tied into that? Or can we do better than that?
So Leslie, can I ask if we just take the Perk Centre as an example? Okay, so you go back to basics. You're building your budget, you know, back up, making decisions, as you said, about what can be deferred, whatever. How do you deal with something like the Perk Centre to say, should we keep it open or should we shut it?
So one thing we'll talk about later on, Your Worship, is we'll talk about levers that potentially have that we can pull on to get our numbers down, if that's what the appetite around the table is. I'm sure it will be. There is what will be put in front of you later on this afternoon in terms of the statement of intent from Bullock Holdings. They're increasing their management fee to 1.030 million from 1.008. So that's something that we could potentially look at, is reducing the management fee of PERT. Now that's across Bullock Recreation. That's not Bullock Homes as such. That's a recreational part of the business. So what that would mean is that BHL would need to look at their ongoing costs and see if they could reduce it by 10-20%, whatever you think is the way forward. In terms of what we're planning on doing for the holdings company, anyway, we are putting a plan in place as Simon's KPI to review at the end of this year as to how we look at the holdings company moving forward. But if it's what we've done in previous years, is we've given options like, you know, from the library, how much it costs per book to deliver a library, how much it costs per session that you have in the theatre. So we've done all that stuff. And that's information that I'd be happy to share after this based on what we did last year. So that's a short answer for that.
Very good, thanks, John. And just for the benefit of our friend over there, Alan, the mayor's not suggesting at all that the Perk Centre should be closed. It was just an example. Paul, and then Rosalie.
Yeah, it's just that there is a statutory responsibility and an audit requirement that council shows that it has continuance and there's enough money to continue. But that's twofold. The reflection of that is the only way you can show continuance is to show that your ratepayers can show continuance in their lifestyle, their income, keep paying their rates. So there needs to be some analysis of can our ratepayers pay? And I've seen statements to say they have, but they've been hollow words because they're not backed up by any evidence. I've analysed the evidence. I have graphed the increase of rates relative to the increase in the rate of inflation over decades. And there's only 1 year that I've found where council's increase in rates was slightly less than the increase in inflation. If you rate it to, if you link the graph again to the increase in people's wages, rates have been significantly above it every year for decades. And that's pointing to a point in the future. The graphs line up for the point of the future where council rates increasing at the rate they have done will absorb every dollar that our ratepayers earn. That's a point of the future. It's not next year. It's not in 10 years, but that is the trend over decades where they're heading. So if it's analysed that that is the trend and it's going to become unsustainable, we need to make changes now before it gets any more critical to people, because it is very critical to people out there in the street. There are some, and you've got to consider half our population is on pensions, okay? They're finding it difficult. They cannot afford that every year. So those figures should not be up to us to argue it. It is a council responsibility to determine what our ratepayers can afford. And these figures should be pruned before they come to us. If we consider that the Gregg has been losing $1 million a year, I hope there's not another $1 million of loss within these figures. We spent $750,000 last year deciding whether to have bins or bags for rubbish. A ridiculous amount of money. And hopefully, however that got into a budget where it could be spent in such huge amounts and such a simple choice, hopefully there won't be any other incidences of that. And that's why I want to see the figures, to make sure there's not any budgets for money in that can be used so frivolously. So these figures should be improved before they come to us, I believe. Because they're unsustainable.
Rosalie?
With the breakdown, the big thing that sticks out is the increase of $1.6 million for salary. Last year, it was debated pretty harsh and loudly that we wanted that clipped, that was too high, and yes, increase in salaries was statutory, that it had to happen, but again, it was mentioned at the time that we would have known about that as to what the normal increase would be. But to see that amount of an increase is just what I consider unacceptable. And so then I carry on to say, right, when the government brings in what their 3% or 4% increase, what are we going to cut? Where are we going to be? Because if we have to cut that down to 3 to 4%, well, where do we go? And I just confirm what Paul has said. I've had probably 3 people that have rung me, and I know one sold their house because they could not afford the rates, and another 2 are in dire straits because the pension or benefits just don't allow for this sort of increase.
Thanks, Rosalie. Brad?
So the increase in salaries, it's not so much that salaries have gone up by that amount, it's that the number of people that we're paying a salary to has clearly gone up very significantly, and gone up beyond the guidelines imposed by the long-term plan. And I'm just not sure why. I'm sure there's an explanation, but I'm not sure, but I'd like to know what it is. Why we've increased the number of staff that we employed so significantly. Because it must, in order for that figure to be derived, it must be quite a significant increase in the number of staff members that we're employing.
I'm afraid to
Yeah.
say there's a few things driving that. One, yes, there is an increase in staff, but they were discussed at the time. But if you can see as well, there is a bit of reduction in consulting costs. So, you know, the plan is to bring in some internal resource to reduce the consultants. So we've got a bit of an offset there. The main driver to that, and you're going to absolutely hate this, is the fact that and we have found that there were omissions in the salaries lines in the long-term plan. So we're starting from a basis which is not correct. So the increase is on a figure which was not correct. It should have been higher at the time.
Wow. Okay.
So it's not as significant as it looks for this year. It's the fact that there were omissions there that just didn't get into the plan.
And Leslie, the reason for the omissions?
Human error.
Okay, we've got Linda and then we've got Phil.
So looking at that, when I presented in a council agenda with expenditure by, you know, a management decision for, you know, expenditure in different areas, and we're told as councillors that don't worry, it's within existing budgets. Well, looking at this, all the budgets are pretty much blown out. So I would be expecting not to see any more papers and statements made by staff that, you know, we've made this decision, but don't worry, it's within existing budgets, because the budgets have been overspent. Well, you know, in my opinion, would that be a correct assumption that we won't be seeing any, basically it's extra expenditure, any savings that we can make would be preferable because they're all in the red, basically. Would that be a correct kind of assumption to make, that we wouldn't be faced with papers saying that, don't worry, there's no, you know, it's within existing budgets. The budgets have been basically miscalculated and they're overspent.
Yeah, I'll take your point on board. Thank you, Councillor Webb. But I think based on this is a summary of the operating cost line of the business. We do have 3,200 general ledger codes, so it's safe to say that this is not every single line item on our budget. So to say that we blow out on every budget line on projects, I don't think that is correct. But what I can say is that certainly in these elements from the summary, you've asked to understand, you know, Councillor Reynolds asked to understand how it's came from. This is how the increases have came from. But it's not based on every project, no.
Would be hoping that we would make savings in some areas to offset the over budgeted or over inflated figures in other areas. Yeah.
So the team have done a lot of work, and we've collectively put in a lot of hours to reduce that and the offset. The figures around the consulting costs, which I think is the conversation we had with you during that long-term plan process, I'd like to see that reduced, that increase or that decrease of consultancy cost bigger than it currently is. I think that's a conservative figure, but we need to do more work. And I suppose just as an overall comment, we've delved into a lot of detail already. This is the first of those conversations with you. I just want to acknowledge that. We've got another workshop booked with you in 2 weeks' time. Between now and then, we will continue to work, and we need to hear from you where you would like to see us focus on. None of us want this. We don't want to put this figure up to you and stand by and say, yeah, this is acceptable, because we don't think it is. We own those mistakes that were made and those figures that were not correctly updated. That is appalling that we're putting you in that position, and it's not a conversation that we want, but it's the reality. We need to deal with it. So we do have in subsequent slides about other ideas that we could put forward to you as a suggestion. They are not re-emphasise, they are not what we are saying you must do, but these are, and I think Councillor Hingston made that point earlier, these are things we need to talk about. But yeah, there have been errors. The other thing that we've found and the team have found, and having the benefit of Leslie and Sahana going through from the ground up, is our modelling that we use, the modelling spreadsheets that we use, had inbuilt errors in them because people were historically just putting in hard-coded numbers, and that was just introducing a skewed number at the end. Again, that's not acceptable, but we are where we are. We need to deal with it, and we do have external costs which have pushed things up, but we want to deal with this. We need to meet it head on, and we want that robust conversation with you, but it's going to be a hard road. We've stripped out several millions already, but we need to do more work.
Cool. Thanks, Simon.
Yeah, so look, having a look at these numbers, and I fully accept that not everything could have been foreseen at the time of the long-term plan, you know, the example being energy costs. But it seems to me that a lot of these figures in here were produced with what you might call educated projections. I pick up your point around salaries, that there were some errors in the LT when producing the LTP, but it seems to me that there are a lot of other things in here that, you know, should have or could have been a bit more accurately forecast. I mean, software costs going up by 25%, you know, that is an example, be the long-term plan number. It all leads to me to come back to my very first point and saying, if we produce an annual plan that's significantly different from the LTP, because now we hear that the LTP was in fact seriously flawed anyway, so why should we be even trying to stick to the LTP? I believe that we should be now in a position to produce an annual plan that goes some way to the affordability concerns within our community, coupled with the work that we see as being essential and we want to proceed with. But the need to stick to the strategy of the LTP, in my view, has just gone out the window, given that the document was seriously flawed in the first place.
John, do you have any comment?
I don't have any comment on that.
Okay, so just to bring
There
it,
wasn't a question really in that.
Okay,
More so.
so just to bring it back, and Leslie's only been here for a couple of months or so, and now got some help. So Leslie, if you had to say, you know, put your finger on the root cause of the issues that you're finding, what would you say?
I think there's just been potentially a model that maybe it's the way the model was used. The model itself is actually okay. It works, but this one we've actually reconciled. We know it's right. I think there's been lack of reconciliations in the past. I think maybe methodology was incorrect, which we've worked on to actually get correct. So things haven't been quite treated correctly in the past. Why that was, it could just be historical, that somebody in the past has done it and they've just kept on doing something that way. But again, hard coding numbers in means that there's going to be errors, because when you're updating your backup to those numbers, it's not going to filter through. So what we've made sure, and what Sahana has done a big job on, is making sure every single number is linked correctly. So if there's an update, it's filtering through, and we've got a reconciliation that proves it. And there's lots of reasons, and I can't really put my finger on it, but I would say there's lots of reasons why.
So this has been sort of a creeping thing over a number of years, rather than a bang, it all went wrong last year.
It has gone for several years, I would say, at least. Yeah.
Okay, we've got Rosalie and then we've got Dave. Thanks, Leslie.
Well, again, it's no satisfaction, but it infuriates me because every year we get told that these figures are correct and we've done everything we can. And yeah, as I say, I'm lost for words because we've been told that they're correct. Everybody, you know, the staff involved have gone back to base to do it, and here we are being told the same again. But to carry on, is there any particular area there that stands out more than others that the calculations have been wrong and it's a bigger increase?
As I said before, there were definitely omissions in when we've seen where the omissions are in the salary information. There will be other areas such as depreciation wasn't treated correctly. Sahana, have you got any more?
Yeah, well, just to show, if we had to look at salaries just in 24-25, because that was actual cost that we incurred, so that's a good base. So if you look at salaries and you look at our consulting costs, the sum is about 12 million. And if you look at the forecasted for LTP for 25-26 and 26-27, the sum of those two, they actually reduced, but we replaced permanent staff. We replaced consultants with permanent staff, and it's not reflective in the number. Whereas if you compare the salaries and consultants between 24-25 and the annual plan 26-27, there's a 6% increase, and it's over 2 years. So that actually justifies your 2 years of a 3% increase. So those numbers are now, the 24-25 and 26-27 look correct. In between, you could see it definitely didn't make sense.
Thanks. Okay, who do we have next? Dave. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Welcome, Dave Hawes.
With your permission, I'd just like to read something that I was going to read later on about the verbal report from the Risk and Audit Committee.
Sure.
Because I think it's pertinent to this discussion we're having. And I'd also say this in light of what Phil said about, you know, what we need to really revisit the LTP as a whole, because we got to cut our clock to suit the circumstances at the moment. So we will have to dramatically go back to basics with the underlying assumptions with the LTP. But what I said in the Risk and Audit, and we all discussed it, I think everybody was pretty much at the Risk and Audit Committee meeting, was under accounting. Said that committee discussions also addressed several problems and challenges in the council's accounting processes, difficulties in obtaining accurate and informative historic audit reports, the current ability of council staff to provide accurate and informative accounts-related reports given the existing software and procedures, risks and challenges stemming from high staff turnover, which has led to a loss of corporate memory or history, and faulty procedures, systems and staff areas that contributed to the late and substandard delivery of 3 previous annual reports, leading auditors to issue disclaimers and caveats. And then in the summary, accounting risk and summary, the floods of 2021 and 2022 caused significant disruption and posed extraordinary challenges for BDC staff. These difficulties, combined with the use of outdated software, legacy Excel spreadsheets, and inadequate systems and procedures, created a perfect storm of circumstances. As a result, annual reports were delayed, incomplete, inaccurate, and at times misleading information being presented. The high turnover of staff further compounded these issues as institutional knowledge and memory were lost. Current councillors and staff are under pressure, that's all of us, to bring historical accounts up to an accurate and audible standard. BDC staff are committed to presenting previous year's accounts to the council in a timely and accurate manner, despite the limitations of existing legacy software and systems. The RAC recommends, and people may take issue with this, that BDC staff be given sufficient time and resources, including the introduction of fit-for-purpose financial software to enable them to fulfill their responsibilities effectively. So pretty much we see we're dealing with the legacy of problems. We're dealing with the legacy of misleading and inaccurate information, and there's very little confidence in the information of old. I have more confidence in the information that's coming through now. But I know that we've still got those legacy systems in place, which is an Excel spreadsheet to run a multi-million-dollar organisation. So, you know, unfortunately, we're going to have to spend more on software and the introduction of that into service so we can get this basis of good information. And I feel somewhat nervous, anxious about sticking to an LTP that was based on those that misleading information. So I just think we need to bear that in mind as we go through this annual plan, that we're setting the scene for years to come, and that they're going to roll over into the LTP when we have to consider all those priorities.
Thanks for reading that out, Dave. That's, you know, it was very appropriate. Linda. Oh, sorry, Tony.
Could you discuss other expenses and what is and what is in that, what sits within that? I think if we're going back to basic things, for rate is open, we need to actually break that over as well. If we're going to every rock. Yes.
So there's quite a lot of expenses under other expenses. It's just been grouped together because we've got so many codes. But there's things like advertising, there's Alpha 1 fees, building research levy, bank fees, overdraft, cafeteria, catering, cleaning, stationery, debt collection, district plan. So I could break that down further if you'd like.
I think,
but
I think if you're going to go on every single rock, pebble, stone, grain, sand.
Yes.
We should be opening it up as well, looking at everything.
Yep.
So that everybody who did a really, like, saying that you were, council would say,
everyone needs to get that clear, accurate picture. So then we're all on the same page.
100%. So we've reviewed it like Leslie said earlier on, with all the GMs sitting together and the whole process that John said. It's been reviewed on every line, but I will definitely give you that summary. Expand this to include that. Yes.
Okay, thanks for that. We've got Paul, and then we've got Jane.
Yeah, Tony really got on the point I was going to make on that, is that I'd like to see a breakdown of some of these categories, not all of them, but some of them I want to see a breakdown, not just of the one Tony mentioned, but look at a list. How long would it take to prepare a breakdown of those so I can see what's in it?
We could have them for the next workshop, 2 weeks time.
Yeah, it just happened to be noticed that mentioned in Tony's question that advertising is in there, right? So within advertising, I know that it became very, very controversial in the community when the council negotiated a contract with the Messenger for advertorials. So an advertorial spiel, it's partisan, self-written promotional material from council that we pay a contract to the Messenger for, and it costs their own staff to prepare it, to hype up the community to think we're great, great, great. And about 4 times a year, they open up a rate demand and they realise it's not. So when that became controversial, it was councillors and community alike were horrified. But management continued to spend it there. But that money should just be cut out. The advertorial should go. We want hard data, and we get hard data from the local paper. So advertorials not wanted from my point of view.
Thanks, Paul. One thing I'd say from, running a large budget in my time on an Excel spreadsheet is that you've got to be very, very careful and have, continuity, across, because you have too many cooks in the kitchen. Slightly small things can turn the whole thing to custard. And I think what we need to do too, while we all agree that what's being presented is not satisfactory in terms of rate rises, is to acknowledge that we've got new people in finding errors that need to be found, and we don't like what we're being served up. That's just the way it's got to be, because otherwise, if it's not this council, it's going to be the next council, who has to deal with these legacy issues. So, thank you, team, for actually the work that you've put in, particularly to the spreadsheets. And it's easy to say, well, we need new and better software. there's always new and better software coming along. But you've got to work with what you've got in the meantime and get it right. So thank you. And now we go to the Deputy Mayor and then Rosalie.
On that new and better software, I see we've got an increase in software maintenance. So does that, we haven't taken into account anywhere in this that for a better financial software package?
We haven't included the software package because we're going to put it in the LTP. Again, it was a cost thing that we were looking at to move it forward. Because it's also the time that it takes. If we go with the system we were thinking of, we've got to get it right. So it takes quite a bit of time to get right anyway. But it does include the new payroll system, which will cut down, make more efficiencies, reduce risk, and it's nearly nothing.
So that another question.
We won't have things thrown at each other.
No. When we look at this, you know, nowhere in this are we have staff, but actually staff time has been taken doing a lot of this work, and we're seeing it over and over again with different projects that we've had. And so you kind of have to weigh it up, but at the end of the day, so we still have a salaries line as well. And so I guess when we're talking about efficiencies, we need to be talking about them from multiple angles so that we are reducing. If we are bringing in a system that provides efficiencies, then we hopefully shouldn't need the salary costs that we've got going forward. That's, you know, that's something we need to be looking at. But I just want to reiterate what Chris has said, that we appreciate you guys being very frank with us here today, because we need to get this right. Otherwise, we are continuing on with a fort system. And so thanks.
Thanks, Shane. Rosalie.
Just a question, and normally I sort of, when I'm doing things, have it all under one heading. You've got general expenses, sundry expenses, and other expenses. So what's the definition of each of those, please? Because I would always just maybe have miscellaneous or other expenses, and it gets too high, break those other expenses down.
And ideally, you are 100% right. It should actually be in one line. Unfortunately, like John said, in our 3,000 lines of accounts, it's been grouped. So it's just been called general expenses or sundry. So as best I could, I tried to keep them consistent with the existing ledger that we have. But to your point, 100%, and that's what we as a team are going to correct going forward, is to try and reduce down the number of accounts we have.
Or else put them with the right
Yes.
category.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Just before we go to day fours, John, we got 3 calls from now. How are we going for time?
Yeah, we're going quite good for time. So probably got another couple of minutes in this slide if it's needed. But if not,
Okay, well, you just push it along if you need to.
Absolutely.
Day fours.
Yeah, just apologies for being late. Had to deal with something before I get it off. So forgive me if I've missed some of the background, but been there for a few times in the past. And you know, I see that we've been hit again with this 15.6% or so general rate rise, and we're now starting to focus in on detail, which to try and find rats and mice. So I mean, to me, I just wanted to get it. You may have already had heads up on the bigger picture in terms of you know, the main drivers, and I just wanted to get it brought up to speed. I guess our electrical increases of 30% charges must play a part. What part does debt servicing play a part? I note that through reading through the agenda papers for today, that you know, if we go back to 22, the 22-23, the ones that we're going to be asked to go and retrospectively pass the report for. I know that we were $19 million net debt at that point in time. We're now looking at $39 million by June. Can I just hope you may have already told people, but if you haven't, what's the effect of that? Because I think they're the two drivers. I think if you can eliminate the rats and mice, of course there's increases through that, but That's mine.
I think so.
Thank you, councillor Hawsey. We've had a discussion a little while earlier on around, the key difference was that in the budget salaries, there was some errors made when we, published the long-term plan document, some human error, was the key element of that. And the other key thing, yeah, absolutely, the debt servicing is a part of it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think we will talk about net debt in a minute, but I know that Sahana and the team have been working really hard on understanding to make sure we're funding things correctly, i.e. we're making sure we're taking out loans at the right time, we're only taking out loans when we're actually doing projects, and just having a real reset. And probably what you'll see in the next slide, I believe. Yeah, the next slide is that our net debt was scheduled to be just over, or nearly 51 million in a long-term plan for next year. However, the projected net debt based on the budget we're showing you today is just over 48. So I guess that's a positive that we can take out this afternoon. I'm fully aware that it's not a positive message today, of course, but that is one positive in terms of how the team are managing our debt in a version.
Can I just ask one question? I know I'm going a bit off track here, but another legacy issue that we should really acknowledge too is, and that is the dredge. Now Leslie's doing a lot of work on that, and there's a paper coming back to us in March. But when we're just so I've got it clear, Leslie, because I asked a question last time, I forgot about the ring fencing, but all of this excludes anything insofar as the port and the dredge, which carries its own debt, doesn't it?
As far as the rates are concerned and the operating expenses, we've not included the dredge or the port because they're not rate funded. But the debt is, we do have to show that in all our reports as being inclusive. So this includes the dredge.
And so my understanding is that the debt that's accumulated there has been funded from council reserves.
Yes.
But that hasn't had a direct effect on rates so far, but it has reduced council reserves, which I think is what I'm seeing in the reduction there. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, John.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that was, I guess, Councillor Hawes' question. That was the next part we're going to get on. What was the impact to our debt? Just going back to the previous slide, as you can see down the right-hand side is all the kind of key variances. So please, we'll talk about this later on, but if there is things that you want to understand a little bit more, then please just phone me or email me. We'll get you an answer. I just wanted to cover that point off. Yeah, the net debts came down. As I said earlier on, Sahana and the team have done a brilliant job to look at that. I think it's been helped by doing a pretty big deep dive into our debt levels. So certainly thanks to the team for that. Is there any questions on our debt just before we? I don't want to. Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I realise there's a slide to come on options, but I want to know now whether the numbers that we're talking about in the 15% does or does not include the potential 400,000.
Doesn't include.
So it doesn't even include that. So if we go to consultation and we find that the community ticks us off to do that, this is an amount to come on top of that number. Wow.
Sorry, what was that, Phil? It's the 400.
For the So we're talking about 15 without that inclusion. Wow.
There's potential. That's the worst case scenario on if you take that in and go ahead with it.
Sorry.
It's a worst case scenario is the 400,000 to include in this year. We've still got to do that work, but it depends on, again, as we've talked, on when it's phased, when we have to draw that debt down. So 400 is the worst case scenario, and draw it down at the beginning, and so hopefully, depending on the phasing of that, if you go ahead with it, that would be reduced and may even have an impact going forward in future years and not next year.
Okay, but for complete clarity then, given that your worst case scenario, we could be talking about a 18-19% increase in rates.
Sorry, for the next year, what we found and I've discussed with Jess is that if we've, depending on how we phase the project, that 452 includes full up funding from day one, and that's not how the project will occur. It includes the full write-off from day one and depreciation from day one. Whereas we would probably only incur that write-off at the end of the year. So it won't really impact, you won't have the full 400K impacting year one. And from year two onwards, you would see that potentially the worst case happen.
Okay, how much then for this annual plan? What's the potential?
Yeah.
Shall we move on and then come back to that one? So Hannah's got
Okay, I think,
You see that the net debt's quoted was over 40, is that right? Or 48 is the net debt.
the net debt in the long-term plan was just over 50. The net debt in the draft annual plan is 40, just over 48.
okay, Shane, and then Rosalie, I think, yep.
I've just a question around the net debt as well, my understanding of it. So on that last screen with net debt, you've got 25, 26 net debt.
Oh, yes.
Is that, we're talking 26, 27 net debt?
Yeah.
So in that net debt, is the 3 million in that net debt as well?
No.
No, okay. So that could be 51 or 52.
But again, that depends on that phasing, as we've been talking about. We would hope to draw it down as late as possible. So it could be that we didn't draw it down until the following year.
Okay, we've got Rosalie and then Paul.
So again, the 5 million that we're going to borrow the BDC for the water, done well. Sure, it's not going to be at a cost to the ratepayer, but it's going to be our debt. So that will be additional in our debt loading as well.
Well, any interest costs that come in will be funded back by the entity. The ratepayer won't be paying for those. But in terms of our overall debt figure, yes, that will be the case. And obviously we've not built that into there because the council haven't approved that yet.
Yeah, but nevertheless, it's giving us greater debt borrowing. It's a bit like I'm hearing that, our harbour and dredge were ring fenced. Yeah, guess what? The money came from our investments. So one minute things are ring fenced, but money has come from our council funding to keep the debt, but it's ring fenced.
Correct.
It
Correct.
it won't cost us anything because everything will be transferred to the entity. So it will be ring fenced. And the plan is not, we wouldn't be drawing it down all at once. So we wouldn't draw it down at the beginning. So it would draw down over the year as and when required.
I fully understand that, but in the documentation I've read, that 5 million will be drawn down by 27, which is just virtually in that 1 year. So to say it's not going to be here, but by the end of the 12 months, that 5 million will be drawn down. And so going on to the water, has any assumptions been made with the transfer? Well, the money owings debt on our targeted rates will come out of our debt. So have any figures been done on that? So in 12 months, 2 years' time, when everything is transferred over to the water entity, how much will that bring our debt loading down by?
To answer your question, that number's not worked out yet.
It blows my mind away to think that we're talking, we're borrowing and that's going to be transferred over. So somewhere that basic figure of what our debt is for our targeted rates that's going to be transferred must have been done some.
We do have a figure, but it's not an up-to-date figure, so we haven't included current.
So I've done the figure up till the end of 24 and it's in the annual report as well. And it's broken down by activity, so we can strip out for each water activity what it is. I just need to update that for the 24-25, which we will have done during this audit. And then
What
before
is
the
it
end
now?
of June,
What is it?
current,
We
not
can
too
find that
certain.
for
Yeah, I
you.
can find out. I can't, not.
Can we have it by a fortnight's time for our next?
Yes, yes,
meeting,
yes,
please?
yes. Got that number.
Thank you, Paul. And then Dave Wilson.
Just a question and then an observation. We had a targeted rate for separation of water, stormwater and wastewater of 5.7 million. That project started. Is that 5.7 million in here as a debt or is it a staged?
It'll be staged. Yeah,
So it's a staged loan. So this, say, 0.57 of a million in here, and that will increment every year by the same. Thank you for that. The other observation is that this is worse than depicted there. And the reason I say that is because we foolishly signed into a local water done well, which is initially, 5.1 million. Will be a loan to that.
4.75, yeah.
4.75, so 4.75, which we presume is about a third here, so about 101.6 million on the water users in the bullet. So our ratepayers again. So it's not in these figures, but it's on the heads of our ratepayers. So when I said earlier that we've got to assess the ability of this organisation's financial continuance, we've got to look at our ratepayers' financial continuance. So whatever rate we set on these people, not only have they got that 1.6 million spread over, 4,000 people, it's enough. It'd buy enough drinking water to drown many people. On top of that, we've got our district scheme. We haven't got the cost of that anymore because we've handed that on to the regional council. Scheme TTPP that was cost 3 million. It's costing now over 10. Costs over 10 by the time they rate our ratepayers for it. Was GST to be added, it'll be 12 million on the population of the bullet that our ratepayers will have to pay as well. And you add to that figure of debt that our ratepayers in this area will be paying, you've got some costs for walls around the place that are also going to be added onto their outgoings. So it's not only our costs in here that we consider, but some of our costs, particularly those for writing our own district scheme and for water, that is going to put huge burdens on our ratepayers. And as far as local water done well, those costs are without making the water any better than it is. So if local water done well has to ramp up to new standards, the only way the water can improve is more money has to be paid out by them on top of those figures. So the load on our ratepayers is immense. So we need to make every pruning, any dollar we can. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Dave?
Yeah, well, I'm a bit sort of concerned when I hear that you talk about net debt. Net debt is debt, total debt minus investments. And then I hear that the dredge is being paid for by drawing down on investments. I step back to the point where we were a net debt of $19 million back in 22-23, and now we're up at this level here. So this is just budget figures, folks. The reality with the local water well, being one of the people that's been trying to get my head around this, is that the debt remains with councils. It's the only way we can borrow from the local government investment fund. So it's the only way that it's going to be. It's going to be sitting under our debt profile. So it is going to add into our net debt. So effectively, whatever happens down there, and you're talking tens of millions of dollars to spend, we've already identified that we're looking at what, 180 or something comes by. So it's a massive amount of debt. Take that as whatever it was, 60 million roughly spend on the district. You're going to more than double the debt just for the water spend, which it's still gonna sit against our debt profile. So that's the reality of it. So I can't see that you can say that the dredge costs are not included. They are indirectly by virtue of the fact that they've added to the net debt by reducing investments, which is a subtraction from total debt. So, you know, this is back to what Paul said. We're talking now about being buried up to our noses in a swamp as a district. And it's just that last little bit that it's going to take that people are no longer going to be able to breathe. Luckily, they've got a long nose. But, you know.
Dave, if I could just pick you up on the numbers you're talking about for, you know, for the Buller and for the wider West Coast. I think, you know, the numbers, and correct me if I'm wrong, are a lot higher than what you're talking about in terms of the spend in each district. That correct, Leslie? So Westport, not Westport, Buller, 120 million over the next 10 years.
Yeah, 180 drinking water over the next 30 years. 180 million over the next 30 years.
Okay, thank you. Well,
Just back to the targeted rate on separation of stormwater and wastewater. So that was put in the long-term plan. Are those people being charged the targeted rate as set out in that document? Or is it reduced on that?
You can find out if you must have done it.
The targeted rate was meant to be $662 per year over a 30-year period. The reason I ask that is because although you've told me that the loan will be staged, okay, so it's going to be a 5.7 million loan spent over 10 years, so we're spending 570,000 a year. What's contributed to that targeted rate is those ratepayers have been charged the interest on 5.7 million from day one, even though you're only borrowing a tenth of it each year. So the interest rate you flagged in the long-term plan is that each year the ratepayers will be paying $280,000 interest, which is 4.5% of 5.7 million.
The ratepayers will be charged the interest based on when the money was borrowed. The interest rate wouldn't kick in straight away if there was no money borrowed from the project.
So they're not paying interest on the money that's being borrowed, they're paying interest on the whole 5.7 million, even though it hasn't been borrowed.
They'll only borrow it what's been drawn down. We'll only pay
Yes,
servicing.
I realise that, but the charge to the ratepayers that contributes to the targeted rate, each year you're charging them $280,000 to be split amongst them. And that $280,000 is 4.5% of 5.7 million. So you're charging interest on the whole loan, the whole period.
or is that to do with?
So if there's figures like this on targeted rates here in this one, and you calculate it the same, you're going to generate a huge surplus into council funds. The ratepayers are paying money they don't need to pay.
Paul, are you referring to what's in the long-term plan now?
I'm referring to what was on last year's long-term plan, and it was went through the consultation process.
Yeah.
And it's the one I referred to where the ratepayers got a choice to be either die by hanging or garroting. They were the two choices of the consultation, so it was a false consultation. They didn't get any real choice. The figures are there. They pay each year interest of $280,000.
Yeah, let's do a bit. We'll do a bit digging on it because I don't think any of us have got the answer, to be honest. Right, our figure test. We'll find out the answer, and then we'll establish exactly what the targeted rate they're paying us.
Yeah, Phil.
Yeah.
On phasing.
Right.
It would be based on phasing, and that's all we would include in the rates.
Yeah, the figures are clear. So,
Yeah.
So for clarification, summary of rates movement, back to your very first slide, that you have in here a number of 358,750 for wastewater separation rates. So can you just expand on that, that is essentially what Paul's talking about, isn't it? So this is for the current, this is for this year, and that amount will be funded from the targeted rate. Am I correct? And what's the little green note there for? What you must have a note to it to have that little green.
Yes, I will follow up with an email too, if that's okay, because the green note is a flag to me. I've also asked the question for some context around that particular charge. It was there in the LTP, and I know we're undertaking that project. I've asked for some feedback on how we would calculate that particular rate. So that's the green note to myself. So if it's okay with you, can I get back to you on that?
And so essentially it'll answer Paul's question about how much it's being rated.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes,
Looks like according to that, they're not being rated anything.
nothing at the moment.
No, there's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing being done there.
Nothing at the moment, but in the next
Yes,
annual plan year that we're talking about, it will be. Yeah.
Back to you, John.
So the next slide we're going to talk about is what we've done this day. I think probably cover a fair chunk of that off. I'm fully aware that we want to start discussing about what we can do. So I think if I'm going to leave this one, I think we can come back to it if we've got time. I'm just not reflecting that we'll have a briefing session in 20 minutes time. And I imagine you probably want to have 5 minute break if we can. So let's just move on to what kind of levers we've got to pull or potential things. Just remember, and you see it highlighting the low range of guidance. This is our suggestions. We've sat at length. Sorry, I didn't realise I wasn't on it. We've sat at length discussing what we think is a potential to look at, but ultimately we really require your input as to what you would like to see on the 11th. Us bringing back to discuss. Councillor Hingston.
Thanks. You know, I don't mean to belittle it, but these are really, by comparison to the figures we're dealing with, a bit like rats and mice. These are low-hanging fruit, where we've got a lot of sacrifice to the community. And to be fair, it's really in the margins of the low percentile sort of benefit to the community. And I think we probably need to revisit. I mean, there's only really two ways you can get things that you increase income or you decrease expenditure. I mean, pretty much that's it in simple terms. And decreasing the sort of expenditure is going to have huge impacts on the community with, I think, very little benefit to the sort of scale of the problem we're dealing with. And I think the levers that we should open ourselves up to, and I know we've been through this before, and probably not within your mandate, but within a governance mandate, to increase the revenue. We should revisit things such as, you know, the mineral royalties that I know is ongoing, canvassing central government to pay for some of these change management programs that they're forced on us. Potentially revisiting things like waste to energy plants or those sorts of things that we previously discounted because of concerns at the time. And potentially looking at ways that we can increase the profitability of organisations that have proven their value, like Buller Holdings. So I'm just trying to put a scale to it. I don't want to preordain what areas we discuss, but the magnitude of the problem we're dealing with requires bigger thinking along the strategic sort of level about how we increase our income. And, you know, when we go down this decrease in expenditure line, I just think cost benefit wise, it's not a good equation.
If I could just comment, I think you're right in terms of the revenue, and with one thing that we have adjusted in this budget, which we haven't talked about in detail, is we've increased fees and charges around just making sure every fee and charge is justifiable, but actually covers costs. So we're not so getting subsidies from the rest of the community for private good benefit. But you're right, it's some of those things you mentioned though are very long term. So we've obviously got to adopt this by 30 June. And the sort of things that you mentioned, Councillor, that they're quite big. And they are things that we're currently advocating for at the central government level, particularly, we've talked about local governance reform. There's no mention about how that would be funded and how are we going to do that work. But that's one of the things that was being emphasised in our submission already. But yeah, it is one of those things we need to keep looking at, and the team do look at. Paul Zarnan has been working particularly in that space around what other sources are there for revenue, because our costs are one lever, but revenue is the other.
Right. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, fully endorse Councillor Hingston's comments. It doesn't make a great deal of difference to the bottom line, but if we start diminishing what we might call well-being items, such as those outlined here, we're really at risk of getting into a downward spiral. We need Buller to be an attractive place for people to come to and live. And if we start diminishing these sort of services, the danger is actually that our ratepayer base starts to diminish, or rather not to grow as rapidly as we need it to grow. So, that is definitely not helping us. It seems to me that the most obvious potential lever is around salaries. That is the biggest item within the blowout. And I think at some point we are going to have a hard discussion around our staffing levels. Just the other thing I want to say is I would suggest that we're probably not maximising our income opportunities on our leases at the moment. So, as a responsible landlord, we should be increasing our rental income on a regular annual basis, rather than allowing things to lapse over a number of years, as they may have actually done. Thanks.
Thanks, Ray. Shane?
I guess the other thing, if we're talking about income, it'd be good to have some information on sale of assets and what we have got in line for sale of assets, what opportunities there are around sale of assets. I think that would be useful. I'm with Ray and Dave when we look at these things, contestable grants. That's to our volunteers in our community usually, who do save us a whole lot of money. Beautification, it's a small budget anyway. I feel like this is a big problem, and even when you talk about looking at staff levels, even that creates more issues, because we've seen what's happened when our staff have been lean. What we've seen today is what happens. And if you put more pressure on the staff that are there, then we run the risk of losing good staff. And so this is not an easy job by any means, but we need to be looking at it from multiple points of view. It's a biggie, and those out there, relook at debt repayments. That would be one I'd go with. The rest of them, maybe parts and reserves contract, but the rest of it's not what I'd like to change. But yeah.
Okay, Paul.
Just picking up on Ray's point, Ray would probably be horrified to know that there's one local landlord with 20 properties, and the council only charges that property owner one water connection fee and one wastewater fee on all 20 properties that they're receiving rent on. So they're bludgeoning off the other connectors for water and stormwater, and that needs rectifying. Thank you.
Dave Wilson.
Yeah, we're back into the same scenario that I've faced for 1500 years, sitting here, trying to go through, being drawn into this argument around why we're, what we're going to do about it, rather than, I really want to know how we got here. I really want to understand how we got here. So you raised an interesting point just before around the near sale of properties, and that sale of properties, the agreement at the time that I moved the motion was that money has been put into development or reconfigured into other council assets. It wasn't about debt development. So now I'm wondering why $5 million or whatever it was, and so far sales of asset money should be sitting in a bank account in a green things account basically has been used of Creech overskilled by the sound of it. So in other words, we've sold this property, we're selling property. This is like somebody burying their head in their sand, realising that their income, they what correctly identified that their income is X, and they want to spend Y, which is X plus so percent. And this has gone on forever. So we haven't addressed it in any one of those 15 years that I've sat here at this table. Every time I sit here at this table, I get the same things brought up. I get the contestable grants, which have been reduced over time, increased over time. It doesn't matter what happens, it's the best spend we're ever going to spend. There's other people are out there doing it in the community for us. All of these things don't affect internally in the structure, internal structure. We never actually get the lift on it, and Graham Lowell sat over there for years and said the same thing. We never get the lift on it and see why this vehicle is using 3 times the fuel that it should be. So my question is now, you know, obviously our biggest spend is in road infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where it was basically. Yeah. I know that the argument keeps going to be 70% government funded, and then we've got the percentage that's local funded, right? 28% of it at the moment, 72%, rising to 75%, I believe, this year. And we never actually look at that and say, well, was that affordable? Or is that where we want to carry on going? You know, that's where we can wipe out $1 billion, $500 million. You know, we can say, we're going to have to not be able to maintain those roads. We're going to have to reduce the maintenance. It might be not resealing, putting a grade through it, turning it into gravel road, it's graded once a year. But that's the only way we're going to actually get in to start cutting back any meaningful cuts in here. And at the end of the day, it's completely irrelevant anyway, because what's going to be done to us through this local water done well is going to turn out and do 3 times as much as what we're looking at here. The debt's going to be 3 times as high. The impact's going to be 3 times as much. And we're walking into that blind people, like I said today, and he took exception to it. That's the first step we're going. So I'm afraid now I see that we really only have one more step to go before the track ball. Okay? So you need to get your heads around that.
Paul.
Over the years, facts that go in my head seem to stick there, and they come out quite readily. I'll tell you how we got here, and it comes from 1989, when we had the amalgamation of councils, which gave scope for more administration. More administration doesn't reduce costs, it increases costs. That was inflicted on us by the Local Government Commission. And there's the source of the problem. And in our time, recently, the Local Government Commission forced the TTPP on us. Oh, it only cost $3 million. The 3 district schemes were existent. This council's was basically complete ready to go out. And what's the result of that? The result of the Local Government Commission forcing it on to the regional council to produce that had neither money nor staff for it has resulted in what's going to be billed to us about $12 million. So we got a third of that just for a district scheme that was existing in their own hands anyway. Add to that the 3 waters from one colour of government morphed into local water done well by the other colour government. They're just the same, basically, in that they're going to add huge extra costs with no extra benefit. Okay? So it's not the government parties that are deciding that, because they come from different political philosophies. It's the bureaucrats in Wellington, like the Local Government Commission, that is forcing these things on small councils like ourselves. In cities, it doesn't matter, because most people are completely removed from what happens in local government, or even knowing who the local councillor is, because they're that big. We're lucky we live in a small area where we're more to grips with grassroots here, we can see it. What's been lacking here and has caused the problem is lack of backbone amongst councillors. Okay, we go back to 1989, there should have been a revolt to stop the amalgamation. Okay, then we've got the
local water done well. Really, it's clear that it's not going to do any good. It's going to be another layer of bureaucracy, which is going to add extra costs before you even start improving the water. So it just needed to be, tell government it's not acceptable. And that was done with 3 waters, and it probably was part of it got government to go out.
Okay, thank you. We've got 5 minutes left. We've got another workshop coming up, John.
Yeah, I guess that's, yeah. One thing, we were really trying to leave this afternoon with an understanding of what other stuff we could bring back in a couple of weeks' time. So just, I don't think we're going to get that. I don't think we're going to be able to tease that out in 5 minutes. Let's be honest about it. However, what I would say is that please just pick up the phone. We can have a discussion. I'll sit with Leslie and the team. Because ultimately I'm fully aware that around the table we need to do something. But ultimately your guidance is the only way, because this is the stuff that we've got, this is the stuff we've found through the multiple hours we've spent reviewing this stuff. And ultimately it's going to be at the end of March time, the end of June time, it's the elected member and the community's decision as to how we move forward.
Thanks, John. Dave Falls, then Phil. And then
My view is that we should have done this years ago. Man used to sit over a race at the time many times. It's send you back to your particular departments to come back and tell us how you're going to reduce expenditure within them. And I know that's a tough call. I know that's but it's sending it back into the operations, so what they can wipe out of next year, what the savings are going to be, and what the cause and effects are going to be of doing that. And I think every department within the management structure, the PDC, needs to go back and do that anymore harder, rather than come out and throw a few things that the community sees from council up there for a removing. I want to see the thing that actually cost money. The $24 million a year roughly annual spend. So that's where we need to have savings. So I would suggest that my view is that staff goes away and comes back to what could be removed into the budget.
if I can ask a question, Dave, in terms of target, are you suggesting that staff come back with what it will take to meet what's in the long-term plan rather than what's been presented today?
Absolutely, Chris. And the other part that I'd just like to quickly add is that I sat here in my very first year on council, 2007, too late to change it. It was already in train. And unfortunately, the scheme that we had, that was Vision 2010, basically built the Perth Energy Centre, wherever it is now, and those spends were massive, and those costs are carried on just escalating. The rise of the impact on rates, and I said that at the time. Major spends like that in a community this size just suddenly set off a chain reaction, which is probably one of the biggest drivers.
I think, if you don't mind, Phil, can I just say one thing? I think that what Dave's saying, and then we'll pass over to Phil, is that if we're going to have a serious discussion with central government, then we need to know exactly where we sit. Government are saying a 4% rates cap. What does our world look like with a 4% rates cap? And if we're going to have a serious conversation with government about what help we might need here, then we need to know what that looks like. Phil.
Yeah, thanks. Look, just very quickly, I totally agree with what Dave's saying. In fact, in my first year here on council, we did exactly that. Budget managers presented to council their project for the year with a line by line breakdown, and we went through it. It sounds like in the weeds. Gee, if that's what we've got to be, if we've got to be in the weeds to get a realistic figure that our community can accept and manage to live with, I've got the time to do it. My next question is now, your last slide, which we haven't visited, but it's do we have no stormwater upgrade or do we go to option 2? Do we still have an opportunity before the, final look of the annual plan? I mean, we've said provisionally that we want to go to a consultation. That's my understanding. Can we reverse that? Can we say it's unaffordable? We don't want to, unfortunately, we will not proceed in the coming year. Do we have that opportunity?
Simon, that's probably one.
Is Anthony still online? Because he can really talk to them. Is Anthony still online?
Maybe it wasn't looking very well.
No. Oh, there he is.
I'm here. Yeah, sorry. Can I just get clarity on the question?
So my understanding is Phil is asking about if we choose not to do the stormwater integration piece, what are the implications of that if we just say that's unaffordable?
So the stormwater integration with the flood walls, that means that we are stuck with the infrastructure that we currently have in terms of draining the town in a heavy rain event, and we have no provision to improve the pipes or to provide pumps to pump water out. So water that gets in during a large storm event will stay in more than it would have if the walls weren't there. The other thing to be mindful of is the pipes that we do need to replace as part of those walls would be replaced over time. It's all included in the 30-year infrastructure strategy. The reason we're looking to do it now is once the walls are in, the cost to put in a new pipe is massively significant because you're effectively rebuilding that portion of the wall. And that puts other risks like the wall, the integrity of the wall at risk as well. So not doing it is an option. You probably won't see a problem in the first few years, but as those pipes age and fail, the cost to replace them is enormous.
Thanks. Okay, guys, we need to wrap it up. John, hand over to you to finish off.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. And like I say, thank you, everyone, for your time this afternoon. We will pick this up. Well, like I say, if anyone's got any thoughts, please phone me, email me. We can take it from there. And we will be returning in a fortnight's time. I think to Phil's point, and this is something we'll have to talk about as the afternoon goes on. I think if that's what we're looking to do, I think there may have to be an opportunity for us to add more workshops into the agenda that you've currently got. Noting, obviously, we've had conversations at the start of the year, at the end of last year around timings and when they were and stuff. But ultimately, from what I hear anyway, this is what seems to come across is that there may be a need for that. So if that's the case, obviously that'll be through Simon and Mayor Jamie and the team to decide. But we will. Mayor Chris, sorry. We will be able to look at what we can do for you.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, everybody. We'll wrap it up there. We'll adjourn for 5 minutes. We've got something else on, and I'm going to have to talk to
Just briefing from Ernst & Young in 5 minutes. So yeah, we've got a non-public briefing. We reconvene at 5 past.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.